The great hall floated in space above the crystal world of Nexus Prime. Inside, creatures from 847 different worlds sat in their special chairs. Some had wings, others had tentacles, and many looked nothing like anything found on Earth. They were the Galactic Council, the rulers of known space for thousands of years. Captain Sarah Chen stood alone in the center of the hall. Her blue uniform looked plain next to the shining robes and strange technologies worn by the aliens around her. She had traveled far from Earth to reach this place, further than any human had ever gone before. The chair above her held Counselor Vextar, a giant insect-like creature with 6 arms and black eyes that never blinked. His species, the Villani, had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were proud and believed they were better than everyone else. So, Vexitar's voice echoed through the hall. The mammals from the Yellow Star want to join us. Laughter filled the air. Some aliens made chirping sounds, others hummed low notes, and a few just clicked their claws together. They were all laughing at Sarah and her request. Sarah kept her back straight and her voice calm. Earth seeks membership in the Galactic Council. We want to trade with other worlds, share knowledge, and live in peace with our neighbors. More laughter. Ambassador Zethkri, a tall blue creature with 4 eyes, waved one of his thin hands. Peace? You speak of peace, yet your species still fights wars on your own planet. You cannot even unite your own kind. We're learning, Sarah said. We've made mistakes, but we want to do better. That's why we're here. A creature that looked like a floating jellyfish pulsed with different colors. Its voice sounded like singing. Your technology is so basic. You still use chemical rockets and simple computers. How can you contribute anything to our advanced civilization? Sarah felt her anger rising but kept it hidden. We may not have your advanced machines, but we have other things to offer. We're good at solving problems, but we don't give up easily. We care about others, even those different from us. This made the council laugh even harder. Vextar leaned forward in his chair. Emotions, he said the word like it tasted bad. You let feelings control your actions. This is why your species is still primitive. Advanced beings use logic, not emotions. But emotions help us understand right from wrong, Sarah replied. They help us protect the weak and fight for what's right. Fighting, another counselor said with disgust. Always fighting. This is exactly why you cannot join us. You are too savage, too violent. Civilized species have moved beyond such things. Sarah looked around the hall at all the alien faces staring down at her. Some looked bored, others seemed amused, but none showed any kindness or understanding. She had hoped this would go differently. We've traveled across space to ask for friendship, she said. We want to learn from you and share what we know. Isn't that what civilization should be about? Counselor Vextar stood up, his massive form casting a shadow over Sarah. Civilization is about order, young human. It's about knowing your place and following the rules set by those wiser than you. Your species lacks the wisdom that comes with age. How old is your species? Sarah asked. The Villani have existed for 50,000 years. We have seen empires rise and fall. We know the dangers of letting primitive species spread their chaos through the galaxy. Another alien, this one covered in scales and breathing through gills, spoke up. The Aquatic Federation agrees. We've watched your kind for the past century. You destroy your own environment, fight endless wars, and can't even agree on basic facts about your own world. Sarah felt something cold growing in her chest. These aliens had been watching Earth for 100 years and had never tried to help or make contact. They had just watched and judged. Maybe if you had offered to help instead of just watching, things would be different, she said. The hall fell silent. The aliens looked shocked that a human would dare speak to them this way. Vextar's voice turned dangerous. You forget yourself, human. You stand before your betters. We do not help primitive species because they must earn their advancement. Those who deserve to reach the stars will do so on their own. And those who don't deserve it, they stay where they belong. Sarah realized then that this had never been a real chance for Earth. The Council had already decided what they thought about humans long before she arrived. This meeting was just for show, a way to make themselves feel better about rejecting another species. I see, she said quietly. So you're not really a council of different species working together. You're just a club for those who think they're special. The alien laughter stopped. Now they looked angry. The vote will be taken, Vextar announced. All in favor of accepting the human petition for membership? Not a single hand, claw, or tentacle was raised. All opposed? Every single alien in the hall raised their appendages. 847 species voting against Earth. The decision is final, Vextar said. Earth is placed under quarantine. No contact, no trade, no recognition until your species evolves beyond its savage nature. Perhaps in a few thousand years you will be ready to join civilized society. Guards appeared beside Sarah, tall robots with glowing eyes. They would escort her back to her ship and make sure she left council space. As she walked toward the exit, Sarah turned back to face the assembled aliens. Her voice carried clearly through the silent hall. "You're making a mistake," she said. "You think being advanced means being cold and emotionless. You think wisdom comes from age alone, but you're wrong. Real strength comes from caring about others. Real wisdom comes from learning from your mistakes and trying to do better." She paused at the doorway, looking back at the hundreds of alien faces. "You say we're too emotional, too violent, too primitive. Maybe that's true. But we're also loyal, brave, and we never give up on the people we care about. You've just told 8 billion humans that the galaxy doesn't want them." Sarah's eyes were hard as steel now. "Humans don't forget, and we don't forgive easily. You might be older and more advanced, but you've never learned the most important lesson of all. Never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose." The guards led her away, but her words echoed in the silent chamber long after she was gone. The aliens sat in their floating chairs, suddenly uncomfortable. Some shifted nervously, others whispered among themselves. Counselor Vextar tried to restore order. "The primitive speaks of revenge as expected. This only proves we made the correct decision. Increase patrols along the quarantine zone. We must ensure these humans stay where they belong." But as the council session ended and the aliens returned to their worlds, many couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The human female's words had carried a promise that felt more like a threat. In the depths of space, Sarah's ship turned away from Nexus Prime and began the long journey back to Earth. She sat in her captain's chair, staring out at the stars, her mind already working on plans. The Galactic Council thought they were so advanced, so civilized. They were about to learn what happened when you cornered a species that had crawled up from the bottom of the food chain on a world where everything tried to kill everything else. They were about to meet humanity at its most dangerous, when it had something to prove. 2 years had passed since the Galactic Council rejected Earth's request for membership. During that time, human ships had been busy exploring space beyond the quarantine zone, looking for new worlds and resources to help their growing colonies. The planet Kepler 442b sat in what Earth's star charts called neutral space. It was a rocky world rich in rare metals that human technology needed. When the mining ship New Frontier discovered it, Captain Maria Santos saw an opportunity to help Earth become stronger. The human colony grew quickly. Within 6 months, Kepler Station housed 3,000 miners, engineers, and their families. They dug deep into the planet's crust, pulling out precious metals and rare elements. The work was hard and dangerous, but humans were used to that. The Galactic Council saw things differently. They had always considered Kepler 442b to be theirs, even though they had never bothered to claim it officially. When hegemony scouts reported human activity on their world, the Council was furious. Admiral Krexnal of the Villani hegemony received his orders directly from Counselor Vextar. Remove the human infestation immediately. Show them what happened to species that didn't know their place. The hegemony fleet arrived in the Kepler system like a storm of metal and energy. 12 massive warships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. Their hulls gleamed with advanced armor that could turn aside any weapon Earth possessed. Their guns could destroy cities with single shots. Admiral Krexnal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Will. Through the viewing screen, he could see the pathetic human settlement on the planet below, and their ragtag collection of ships in orbit. Old cargo haulers converted mining vessels and a few small patrol craft. It would hardly be worth calling it a battle. "Open communications," he ordered. The face of Captain Sarah Chen appeared on his screen. She was older now, with new lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her hair. She commanded the converted heavy hauler Defiance, the largest ship in the human fleet. "I am Admiral Krexnal of the Villani hegemony," he announced. "You are in violation of Galactic Council space. Surrender immediately and abandon this world or face the consequences." Sarah looked directly at him through the screen. "This is neutral space, Admiral. We have every right to be here. Our people have built homes on this world. We won't abandon them. Krexnall was amazed by her defiance. You have 18 ships against my 12. Your vessels are primitive cargo haulers. My ships carry weapons that can crack planets. Surrender now and we will allow you to leave with your lives. Counteroffer, Sarah said calmly. Leave our system now and we won't have to destroy you. The Admiral stared at her in disbelief. Was this human female insane? Did she not understand the situation? You cannot be serious, he said. This must be some primitive attempt at humor. Deadly serious, Admiral. You came here looking for a fight. You're about to get one. Krexnall cut the communication and turned to his weapons officer. Destroy their flagship. Make it quick and clean. Perhaps the others will see reason. The Dominion's will fired its main cannon, a beam of pure energy that could vaporize a mountain. The shot struck the Defiance dead center. The human ship shuddered and pieces of hull flew off, but it kept flying. Its engines still burned and its weapons still worked. The Admiral frowned. His intelligence reports had said human ships were fragile. Impossible, his weapons officer said. That shot should have destroyed them completely. What the hegemony didn't understand was that human ships were built differently. Where alien vessels relied on energy shields and perfect hulls, human ships were designed to take damage and keep fighting. They had multiple backup systems, redundant power sources, and could operate even when half destroyed. The human fleet moved to attack. They came at the hegemony ships from all sides, not in the neat formations that galactic military doctrine taught, but in a chaotic swarm that was impossible to predict. The Defiance rammed straight into a hegemony cruiser, its reinforced hull tearing through the alien ship's elegant armor. The cruiser's shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not a massive chunk of metal moving at high speed. Other human ships used mining charges as weapons, launching containers full of explosives that stuck to enemy hulls before detonating. Cargo haulers released clouds of metal debris that clogged alien sensors and damaged their delicate equipment. But the biggest shock came when human boarding pods started hitting hegemony ships. The Villani had never seen anything like it. Humans in armored suits cut through hull plating with industrial tools, fighting their way into alien ships corridor by corridor. The hegemony soldiers were used to fighting at long range with energy weapons. They had never faced enemies who would charge at them with welding torches and mining equipment. Humans fought in environments that would kill most aliens, in vacuum, in toxic atmospheres, in spaces filled with radiation. The battle became a grinding siege that lasted for 3 days. The hegemony kept expecting the humans to surrender when the odds became hopeless. But humans didn't seem to understand the concept of hopeless odds. When the Defiance was finally crippled beyond repair, Captain Chen didn't surrender. Instead, she set the ship's reactor to overload and rammed it into the Dominion's will. The explosion took both ships and their crews into the darkness of space. Admiral Krexnall managed to escape in a life pod, but his flagship was gone. Of his 12 ships, only 6 remained in fighting condition. The humans had lost 16 of their 18 vessels, but they had made the hegemony pay dearly for the victory. The worst part for Krexnall was what the humans did to the prisoners they captured. The Admiral expected them to be tortured or executed, as was proper for defeated enemies. Instead, the humans treated their wounds, gave them food, and tried to talk to them. The captured Villani soldiers returned to the fleet with disturbing stories. The humans had asked them questions about their lives, their families, their dreams. They had shown them pictures of human children and talked about their hopes for the future. Some of the soldiers seemed confused about why they were fighting. When the battle was finally over, Kepler Station lay in ruins. The human colony was destroyed, its 3,000 people dead or captured. But as the hegemony fleet prepared to leave, they received one final transmission from the planet's surface. It was a recording from Captain Chen, sent just before the Defiance exploded. Her image appeared on every screen in the hegemony fleet, her eyes burning with fury and determination. "You came here to show us our place," she said, "to prove that humans are weak and primitive. Well, you've learned something today. You've learned that humans don't break easily. You've learned that we'll fight for our homes and our families no matter what the odds." She leaned closer to the camera. "But most importantly, you've learned that actions have consequences. You killed 3,000 innocent people today. Men, women, and children whose only crime was trying to build a better life among the stars." The image flickered as explosions shook the recording equipment. "Remember Kepler Station. Remember the price you paid to destroy it, because this is just the beginning. You think 800 species in your council makes you strong. You've just made enemies of 8 billion humans, and we're coming for you. The transmission ended, but its message spread throughout the galaxy. Other species heard about the battle and the humans who had made the mighty hegemony bleed. Some laughed at the primitives who had dared to fight their betters. Others wondered what would happen when those primitives came back for revenge. Admiral Krexnall filed his report with the Council, claiming a great victory. But he left out the part about his nightmares, where he saw Captain Chen's burning eyes and heard her final words echoing through the void. We're coming. And in the depths of space, beyond the reach of Council sensors, other human ships had watched the battle from afar. They had learned valuable lessons about hegemony tactics and weaknesses. More importantly, they had learned that the galaxy's great powers could bleed. The survivors of Kepler Station would become legends among humans. Their sacrifice would be remembered, and their deaths would not go unavenged. The Galactic Council had wanted to teach humanity its place in the universe. Instead, they had just given 8 billion humans a reason to fight. The problems started small. A message meant for the Zephyrian technocracy ended up in Villani space instead. A trade agreement between two species got corrupted during transmission, turning a peace treaty into what looked like a declaration of war. The Galactic Communication Network had always had minor glitches, so nobody paid much attention at first. Dr. Elena Vasquez floated in the zero gravity of her hidden laboratory, built inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the space between star systems. Around her, dozens of human technicians worked at computer terminals that glowed with alien symbols and human code mixed together. Elena had been a computer programmer on Earth before the Kepler Station massacre. Now she was something the galaxy had never seen before, a human who understood both human creativity and alien technology. The hegemony ships destroyed at Kepler had provided her team with everything they needed to understand how the galactic network really worked. Status report. Elena called out to her team. We're in, said Marcus Chen. No relation to the late Captain Sarah Chen, though he wore her name like a badge of honor. I've got access to the Etherian Collective's quantum communication hub. They never changed their security codes after we hit the industrial sector. Elena smiled grimly. The Etherian Collective ran the galaxy's communication network, connecting all 847 council species through quantum entanglement arrays. They were peaceful beings who believed in free information flow, which made them perfect targets for human infiltration. What about the factory networks on Mechanicus 7th? Elena asked. That's where it gets interesting, replied Susan Park, a former mining engineer who had escaped Kepler Station before the attack. The Zephyrians think their factory AI is perfect, but they built it on Etherian communication protocols. If we can make the network tell the factories that flawed parts are actually perfect? Elena nodded. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The galactic species had built their civilization on trust. Trust in their AI systems, trust in their communication networks, trust in their own superiority. They had never considered that someone might turn their own technology against them. The humans had learned hard lessons at Kepler Station. Direct confrontation with the galactic powers was suicide. But humans had always been good at finding other ways to fight. If they couldn't match alien technology, they would use that technology's weaknesses against its creators. Begin Phase 2, Elena ordered. Across the galaxy, the glitches became more serious. On Mechanicus 7, the great factories that built starship engines started producing components that looked perfect, but had tiny flaws in their molecular structure. The factory AI reported that everything was working normally, but ships began having mysterious engine failures weeks after leaving port. The hegemony's newest battleship, the Pride of Veltar, suffered a complete power failure while on patrol near the galactic rim. The crew was rescued, but the ship itself was lost when its orbit decayed into a gas giant. The official investigation blamed a manufacturing defect in the power core. Similar failures began happening throughout Council space. Not enough to cause panic, but enough to make people nervous. The species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years were starting to question their own technology. But the humans weren't just attacking machines. They were attacking something more fundamental: trust. A diplomatic message from the Crystal Dominion to the Aquatic Federation was altered during transmission. Instead of discussing trade agreements, it contained insults about the Federation's primitive water-breathing ways, and suggested that the Dominion considered them to be barely evolved fish. The Federation's response was equally insulting, though they hadn't actually written it. The message that reached the Dominion suggested that crystal-based life forms were pretty rocks with delusions of intelligence. Both species blamed each other for the insults. Neither realized that a human programmer sitting in an asteroid base had written both messages. Similar incidents began occurring throughout the galaxy. Ancient allies found themselves exchanging hostile communications. Trade disputes escalated into diplomatic incidents. Species that had worked together for millennia started viewing each other with suspicion. The humans were careful to make their attacks seem random. Sometimes they helped one species against another. Sometimes they caused problems for everyone equally. The goal wasn't to destroy any particular government, but to make the entire galactic system unstable. Dr. Vasquez understood something that the council members had forgotten. Fear was more powerful than any weapon. The aliens had grown comfortable in their advanced civilization, trusting their machines to keep them safe and their allies to stay loyal. Humans were showing them that both of those assumptions could be wrong. The most devastating attack came 6 months after the Shadow War began. The Galactic Council was meeting on Nexus Prime to discuss the recent technical difficulties when every screen in the Great Hall suddenly displayed the same image. Captain Sarah Chen's final transmission from Kepler Station. "Remember Kepler Station?" her voice echoed through the chamber. "Remember the price you paid to destroy it? Because this is just the beginning." The aliens looked around in panic. How had humans penetrated the most secure facility in the galaxy? How long had they been watching council meetings? What else did they know? Counselor Vextar tried to maintain order, but his voice shook slightly. "This is obviously some kind of technical malfunction. Our security systems will identify and correct the problem, but the security systems were already compromised. Every time the Villani tried to trace the signal, they found themselves chasing ghosts through their own networks. The humans had learned to use the galaxy's own infrastructure against itself. The real masterpiece came when the Council's own security system began targeting Council members as hostile entities. Automated defenses that were supposed to protect the Great Hall instead tried to capture or eliminate the very aliens they were designed to serve. The emergency session ended with Counselor Vexitar and 12 other high-ranking officials trapped in a conference room while their own security robots tried to break down the door. The lockdown lasted for 6 hours before technicians could regain control of the system, but by then the damage was done. If the humans could take control of Nexus Prime security, what else could they do? What other systems had been compromised? The paranoia spread like a virus through galactic society. Species that had been allies for thousands of years began pulling back from joint projects and shared networks. The great communication system that had held the galaxy together for millennia was seen as a potential threat. Some species tried to build their own separate networks, but they lacked the Etherians' expertise with quantum entanglement. Others attempted to go back to older, more primitive communication methods, but found that their entire civilization depended on the integrated network. The humans watched from their hidden bases as the galaxy slowly tore itself apart. Species that had never fought wars began building weapons. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries were abandoned due to security concerns. The golden age of galactic civilization was ending, replaced by fear and suspicion. Elena Vasquez stood in her command center, watching reports flow in from across the galaxy. Her screen showed the location of every human infiltration team, every compromised system, every species beginning to doubt their neighbors. "How long before they figure out it's us?" Marcus asked. Elena considered the question carefully. "Some of them already suspect. The prescient seers have been sending warnings about probability manipulation by an unknown force. But suspecting and proving are different things." She turned to look at the star charts on her wall, showing the locations of council worlds and the human teams working to undermine them. "Besides, by the time they can prove anything, it won't matter. We're not trying to hide forever. We're just buying time for the fleet to prepare." Marcus frowned. "The fleet? What fleet?" Elena smiled, but there was no humor in it. "The one that's been building in the dark spaces between stars. The one that's going to show the galaxy what humans can do when we're really angry." She touched a control, and new images appeared on her screens, ships under construction in hidden shipyards, powered by fusion reactors built from salvaged alien technology, weapons designed by human engineers who had studied every weakness in galactic defenses. "The Council thinks this shadow war is our revenge for Kepler Station," Elena said. "They think we're just trying to cause trouble and make them look foolish." She looked out at the stars through her laboratory's viewport. "They have no idea that this is just the warm-up act. We're not trying to destroy their civilization from the inside. We're just making sure they can't work together when the real war begins." In the depths of space, Admiral Chen's replacement was putting together the largest human fleet ever assembled. Ships built in secret, crewed by people who remembered Kepler Station and were ready to make the galaxy pay for what it had done. The Shadow War was working perfectly. The galactic species were so busy fighting each other and questioning their own systems that they weren't paying attention to what humans were really doing. By the time they realized their mistake, it would be too late. The galaxy was about to learn that humans weren't just good at breaking things from the inside. They were also very good at building. The 3 years after the destruction of Kepler Station, the human fleet emerged from the darkness between stars like a storm of metal and fury. These were not the converted mining ships that had fought so desperately above that doomed world. These were warships built in secret shipyards hidden in the void, forged from salvaged alien technology and human engineering. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood on the bridge of the Terran Retribution, the flagship of humanity's revenge fleet. She had been Sarah Chen's second-in-command at Kepler Station, one of the few survivors who had escaped the massacre. Now she commanded 200 ships and 50,000 humans who all shared the same goal: make the galaxy pay for what it had done. The first target was Veltar Prime, the homeworld of the Villani hegemony. It was a massive planet covered in gleaming cities, protected by orbital defense platforms that the aliens believed were impregnable. For 3,000 years, no enemy had ever threatened the Villani homeworld. That was about to change. "Status report," Admiral Torres ordered. "All ships are in position," replied Commander Martinez, her tactical officer. "The orbital defense grid has 12 major platforms and 48 smaller stations. They're all connected to the planetary AI network." Torres smiled grimly. That network connection would be their downfall. Dr. Vasquez's teams had been working inside galactic computer systems for years now, mapping every weakness and creating backdoors that could be exploited. Signaled Dr. Vasquez. "Begin the electronic assault." On the planet below, the Villani defense coordinators watched their screens in growing alarm. The orbital platforms were supposed to automatically target any approaching ships, but instead they were turning their weapons on each other. The AI that controlled the entire defense grid had somehow classified the platforms as enemy targets. Within 30 minutes, the great orbital defense grid was destroying itself. Explosions lit up the space around Veltar Prime as platforms that had guarded the world for centuries became twisted metal and debris. But the real shock came when the human ships began their assault. The Villani had expected the humans to attack like civilized species, with energy weapons and elegant tactics. Instead, they watched in horror as human soldiers were launched at their remaining defenses in armored boarding pods. The humans used themselves as guided missiles, steering their pods directly into defense stations and then fighting their way through the corridors inside. They didn't seem to care about their own safety, only about completing their mission. Commander Zektar, leader of the Veltar Prime Defense Force, had never seen anything like it. His soldiers were trained to fight in clean, controlled environments. They relied on their advanced weapons and armor to keep them safe. But humans fought in ways that defied all military logic. They attacked through hull breaches, fighting in vacuum where most aliens would die instantly. They used industrial equipment as weapons, turning maintenance tools into instruments of destruction. When their weapons ran out, they fought with bare hands and improvised clubs. But the most terrifying thing was their coordination. Where galactic forces relied on computer networks and AI assistance, humans seemed to operate on instinct and emotion. They knew what their comrades were thinking without needing to communicate. They covered each other's weaknesses and supported each other's strengths in ways that couldn't be programmed or predicted. The defense of Veltar Prime collapsed within 6 hours, not because the humans had superior technology, but because they fought with a dedication and fury that the Villani couldn't match. Every human soldier seemed to be fighting for something personal, something worth dying for. When the battle was over, Admiral Torres received a communication from the planetary government. She expected surrender, maybe a plea for mercy. Instead, she got something she hadn't expected. The image on her screen showed Commander Zektar, but he looked different somehow. Older, more thoughtful. Behind him stood several other Villani officers, and their expressions were strange too. "I am Commander Zektar," he said slowly. "I wish to speak with you about things I have learned," Torres frowned. "What things?" "Your prisoners from Kepler Station," Zektar replied. "The ones we captured and held for questioning, they told us things. About your species. About your reasons for fighting. I did not understand then, but now—" He paused, struggling with words. "They told us about your families. About how you protect the weak and help those who cannot help themselves. They showed us pictures of your children and spoke of hopes for the future. We thought they were trying to make us weak with emotions." Zektar looked directly at Torres through the screen. "But today, watching your people fight and die for each other, I think perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps emotions are not weakness. Perhaps they are what make you strong." Torres stared at him in amazement. This was not what she had expected from a defeated enemy. "What are you saying, Commander?" "I am saying that for 3,000 years my people have ruled through fear and force. We told ourselves this was civilization, this was progress, but we never asked if it was right. We never questioned whether there might be a better way." Behind Zektar, other Villani officers nodded in agreement. They looked like soldiers who had discovered that everything they believed was wrong. "Your prisoners taught us about concepts we had never considered. Individual worth. Personal freedom. The right to choose your own path instead of following orders without question. These ideas have spread among our people, Admiral Torres. They cannot be stopped." Torres realized what had happened. The humans captured at Kepler Station hadn't just been prisoners. They had been teachers, sharing human values with their captors. They had planted seeds of change that were now growing throughout Villani society. "My government ordered me to fight you," Zektar continued, "but my soldiers are asking questions now. They want to know why we fight. They want to know if there might be a better way to live." On screens throughout her fleet, Torres could see similar scenes playing out across the galaxy. The Shadow War had weakened the bonds between species, but something else was happening too. Everywhere humans had been taken prisoner. Everywhere they had interacted with aliens, new ideas were spreading. The rigid hierarchies that had kept galactic civilization stable for thousands of years were crumbling, as ordinary citizens began to question their leaders. Worker drones were refusing to follow orders without explanation. Slave species were remembering what freedom meant. But not everyone was ready for change. The most powerful members of the Galactic Council were organizing a massive counterattack. They saw the human ideas as a virus that threatened everything they had built. Admiral Torres received a priority transmission from Dr. Vasquez. "Rebecca, you need to see this. The Council is mobilizing everything they have. Over 3,000 ships from dozens of species. They're calling it the Final Solution Fleet." Torres looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy force. Her 200 ships would be vastly outnumbered, but she wasn't worried. The humans had learned something during their years in the darkness between stars. "Dr. Vasquez, are you ready to show them what we've really been building out here?" "All systems are ready, Admiral. Phase 4 is go." Torres opened a channel to her entire fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Today we face the combined might of the Galactic Council. They outnumber us 15 to 1. They have more advanced weapons and better technology." She paused, looking out at the stars where her people prepared for battle. "But they've forgotten the most important lesson in warfare. You can't defeat an idea whose time has come. We're not just fighting for revenge anymore. We're fighting for every species that's been told to know their place. We're fighting for everyone who's been silenced by the powerful." On her tactical screen, Torres could see the Council fleet approaching. Thousands of ships representing hundreds of species, all united in their determination to crush the human rebellion. "They think this war is about technology and numbers," Torres continued. "They think they can win by having bigger guns and more ships. But they're wrong. This war is about something they've never understood. The power of people who refuse to give up." She looked around her bridge at the human officers who had followed her into the darkness and back again. "Today we show the galaxy that evolution isn't about becoming cold and logical. Real evolution is about becoming more than you were before. It's about lifting others up instead of keeping them down. Torres raised her hand to give the attack order. All ships, engage the enemy. And remember, we're not just fighting for humanity. We're fighting for the future of every thinking being in this galaxy. The Battle of Veltar Prime began as the human fleet charged into the massive council formation. But this time they weren't alone. Ships from a dozen species had broken away from the council fleet. Their crews inspired by human ideas about freedom and equality. The final battle for the galaxy's future had begun, and for the first time in thousands of years, the outcome was far from certain. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime floated empty in the darkness of space. The crystal amphitheater that had once housed 847 species now held only silence and memories. Dust gathered on the floating chairs where the most powerful beings in the galaxy had once decided the fate of civilizations. Admiral Rebecca Torres walked slowly through the abandoned corridors of the station. Her footsteps echoed in the vast spaces where alien diplomats had once debated and argued. The war was over, but victory felt strange and hollow, in this place where humanity's long journey had truly begun. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Veltar Prime. The final confrontation between the human fleet and the Council's forces had lasted 3 days and changed everything, not because of superior weapons or clever tactics, but because of something the Council had never prepared for. Half their own fleet switching sides in the middle of the battle. When Admiral Torres had given her speech about fighting for the freedom of all thinking beings, her words had been broadcast across the entire Council fleet. Soldiers and officers from dozens of species had heard her message and realized they were fighting on the wrong side. The great alliance that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years had collapsed in a matter of hours. Species that had been loyal servants of the Council for millennia suddenly remembered what it meant to think for themselves. Torres paused in front of the empty council chamber. Through the transparent walls, she could see the chairs where Councillor Vexitar and his allies had once sat in judgment over humanity. They were all gone now, fled to distant galaxies or hidden worlds where they could pretend the old order still existed. "I thought I might find you here," a voice said behind her. Torres turned to see Dr. Elena Vasquez approaching, looking older, but more peaceful than she had during the Shadow War years. The brilliant programmer who had helped bring down galactic civilization now worked to build something better in its place. "How are the negotiations going?" Torres asked. "Better than expected," Elena replied. "The Etherian Collective has agreed to redesign their communication network to prevent future infiltration. They're actually grateful that we showed them the security flaws." She joined Torres at the viewing wall, looking out at the empty chamber. "The Crystal Dominion is harder to work with. They're still convinced that hierarchy and order are the only ways to maintain civilization, but even they're starting to change. Their own people are demanding more say in government." Torres nodded. The changes hadn't been easy or peaceful everywhere. Some species had adapted quickly to the new reality, embracing concepts like individual rights and democratic government. Others had fought desperately to maintain their old ways, leading to civil wars and social upheaval. But the changes couldn't be stopped. Once people had tasted freedom, they wouldn't go back to being slaves. "What about the Villani?" Torres asked. Elena smiled. "Commander Zektar is now President Zektar, elected by his own people. He's been asking for human advisors to help design a new constitution. Apparently his soldiers liked our ideas about democracy and wanted to try them." It was ironic, Torres thought. The species that had seemed most hostile to human values had become some of their strongest supporters. The Villani people, freed from thousands of years of rigid hierarchy, had embraced change with enthusiasm that surprised everyone. And the former slave species? "That's where things get really interesting," Elena said excitedly. "The Outer Rim Confederacy now includes over 200 species that were once considered primitive by the Council. They're building their own trade networks and defense forces. Some of their innovations are actually more advanced than anything the old Council developed." Torres wasn't surprised. The Council had always assumed that being advanced meant being old and established. They had never considered that newer, younger species might have fresh ideas and different perspectives. The two women walked together through the station's empty corridors. In the distance, they could see human and alien technicians working to convert Nexus Prime into a memorial and museum. The station would stand as a reminder of both the galaxy's dark past and its hope for a better future. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked quietly. Everything we did during the Shadow War? All the systems we destroyed, all the chaos we caused? Torres considered the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary, she said finally. I regret that the Council forced us to those extremes. But I don't regret the outcome. She gestured toward a viewing port where they could see ships from dozens of species working together on a joint construction project. Former enemies cooperating as equals, sharing knowledge and resources freely. Look at them, Elena. When was the last time the galaxy saw that kind of cooperation? Not because someone with superior firepower demanded it, but because people chose to work together? Elena followed her gaze and saw what Torres meant. The ships outside represented species that had barely known each other under the old council system. Now they were building something together, creating new technologies and exploring new possibilities. The prescient seers contacted me last week, Elena said. They wanted to thank us. Torres raised an eyebrow. The ancient seers had been among the few council species that had tried to warn about humanity's potential for disruption. They said their probability calculations are showing something they've never seen before, Elena continued. For the first time in thousands of years, the future is truly uncertain, not because of chaos or destruction, but because there are so many new possibilities that their computers can't predict them all. And they see that as a good thing. They said that stagnation is just another form of death. The galaxy had been on the same path for so long that nothing really new could happen. We changed that. Torres walked over to the great chair where Counselor Vexitar had once sat. The massive seat seemed smaller now, less impressive. It was just furniture, she realized. The power it had represented was an illusion, maintained only as long as people believed in it. Have you heard from Captain Chen's family? Elena asked. Her daughter graduated from the New Earth Space Academy last month, Torres replied. Top of her class. She's been assigned to the new Kepler, the first ship in our cultural exchange program. The new Kepler was humanity's way of honoring the dead while building toward the future. Instead of a warship, it was designed for peaceful exploration and diplomacy. Its mission was to make contact with species beyond the old council boundaries, to share human values of cooperation and mutual respect. Sarah would be proud, Elena said softly. I think she'd be amazed, Torres replied. When she spoke to the council all those years ago, she asked for friendship and partnership. They laughed at her. Now look what we've accomplished. Through the station's communication array, they could hear fragments of messages from across the galaxy, trade negotiations between former enemies, cultural exchange programs between species that had never met, scientific collaborations that were already producing breakthrough discoveries. The galaxy is loud again, Elena observed. During the Shadow War, everyone was afraid to communicate, afraid their messages would be intercepted or corrupted. Now they can't stop talking to each other. Torres smiled at that. It was true. The quantum communication networks that had once been weapons of war were now carrying an endless stream of conversations, debates, arguments, and agreements. The galaxy was alive with discussion and disagreement, hope and conflict, all the messy complications of free people trying to build something better together. What happens now? Elena asked. We've accomplished everything we set out to do. The council is gone, the old hierarchy is broken, and people are free to choose their own paths. What's left for us to do? Torres thought about that question. For years, her life had been focused on revenge, on making the galaxy pay for what it had done to humanity. But revenge was a limited goal. Once you achieved it, what came next? We help, she said finally. We help people figure out how to use their freedom. We help solve the problems that come with rapid change. We help build the institutions that will keep this new galaxy from falling apart. She looked around the empty council chamber one more time. The hard part isn't destroying the old system, Elena. The hard part is building something better to replace it. That's going to take generations. Elena nodded slowly. So we're not just warriors anymore. We're teachers, engineers, diplomats. We're whatever the galaxy needs us to be, Torres said. That's what humans do. We adapt. As they prepared to leave the station, Torres took one last look at the chair where Counselor Vexitar had once pronounced humanity too primitive for galactic civilization. The old Villani counselor had been wrong about almost everything, but he had been right about one thing. Emotions could be dangerous. Human emotions had toppled an empire that had lasted for thousands of years. Human love, human loyalty, human anger, and human hope had reshaped the galaxy. The cold logic that the Council had prized so highly had been no match for the fire of human passion, but emotions could create as well as destroy. The same feelings that had driven humanity to war were now driving them to build something better. Love for their families, loyalty to their friends, hope for the future, and yes, even controlled anger at injustice. The galaxy was no longer silent.